more laughs than
Are there men who aren't gross? Yes. Are there women who aren't beautiful? Yes. But I'm not talking about them, okay? So the message is about gross men and beautiful women. Now, I'll tell you in a little bit how I came to think about this message or what inspired it. It wasn't Esther. That actually came after I was already considering some things and studying and laying all this out and began to think about that story and how it fits with everything that that was going on in my mind. But this is a subject comes up a lot as a man who's a pastor, which I guess all pastors should be men, but as a male, being a pastor, thinking through the Bible whenever I read it and thinking about the fact that there are women out there listening to the messages, reading their Bibles, and it's something that's always just kind of not bothered me, I guess, but something I think about a lot is what would it be like to read the Bible from a woman's point of view? And I've asked my wife about this a few times, try to get some help. I've asked some other ladies. Number one, I've always thought this, when you read the Bible and it's always talking about men, as far as the audience that it's talking to is usually men. How does a woman naturally apply that to herself? You know what I mean? And I've seen ladies' meetings where they're like a woman after God's own heart, right? Because the Bible talks about David being a man after God's own heart. So they apply that to themselves. And I'm like, is that hard to do? Or does it just come naturally? Or are you like, why is the Bible always talking about men and not women? I mean, there's a lot in the Bible about women, but you know what I mean? Like the tip tends to be like the main audience the Bible's talking to is usually men. So I think about that, and I've asked my wife, and of course, she's raised in church and raised to believe the Bible and trust the Bible, and so she doesn't. I don't think it's really bothered her, or she's given it a whole lot of thought. And then I've also thought about this, what do you think about the way women are treated or portrayed in the Bible? And it seems like so often they're treated kind of like property, and the men are, just treat them badly. I mean, you can go to even in the law, the laws that God had to allow because of things that were going on, or he had to, say, here's how you judge this situation or that situation. And of course, in our society today, it's ridiculed and it's looked at as the Bible is just a wicked book and it's trying to keep the women down and all this kind of stuff. I don't believe that. Obviously, I believe the Bible is God's word. It's inspired. It's right. Everything about it is right. I mean, one of the things I love so much about the Bible is its honesty, though. Its truthfulness. It's not painting a picture that makes it sound like human or anything less or anything more than what we are. And so the failures of all of our Bible heroes, they're in there. The bad things that they do, they're in there. And so just because people treat other people a certain way, and we read about that in the Bible, doesn't mean that's the way we're supposed to do it. It just means that that's something that goes on. That's human nature. So I recently asked my wife, I said, what do you think about the fact that women are often portrayed like that or whatever? And again, she's like, I don't really think about it much. I've just always been raised that the Bible's right, and so therefore I try to read it from that perspective. But I'm telling you, in the world that we live in today, it is not popular. So even Christians, a lot of Christians that are very up, in the current events and all that in the world, and the things that the women are supposed to be fighting for, and the different rights and the feminism, and I guess feminism is not really fought for much anymore. But those kinds of things, to read the Bible and to be a Christian and to still have the modern views of all that, you would have to really start twisting a lot of scriptures to make it fit what you want it to say. And so I just tried to ask, I wanted to hear a woman's point of view about what they think whenever they see those kinds of things. Here are some verses that come up a lot. I don't shy away from preaching them, and I think they're very important, especially today that we revisit these a lot. But they seem very out of place in our society today. But let's look at a couple of them. 1 Timothy chapter 2. First Timothy 2, let's start in verse 9. In like manner also the women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broided hair or gold or pearls or costly array, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. Let the women learn in silence with all subjection. For I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3. It says, likewise, you wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not in word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear, whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair, or of wearing of gold, or of putting on of apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart. That's a good example right there. It says the hidden man of the heart, and he's talking to women, right? So that's just the terminology that's used, like the hidden man. Look, someone says amen, you don't have to have a woman, okay? Our world's got this all mixed up, like, oh, how could you say the hidden man? I mean, she's a woman. Look, just don't get offended about it, and just understand this is God's word. In that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God a great price. For after this manner in the old times, holy women also who trusted in God adorned themselves, being in subjection unto their own husbands, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. Likewise, ye husbands, hey, we're not talking about the husbands right now, okay? We'll save that for Father's Day. So from a man's perspective, living in a kind of feminist society, I don't know if you can call it feminist, but it's kind of a woman's lib society, whatever. I often feel almost out of line, like out of place, talking about women from a biblical perspective. Because I always want to, sometimes I get uncomfortable. I think I've done it enough now where I don't feel that way anymore, but I used to be like, oh, what are the women thinking whenever I preach this or whatever? I'm not a woman, so I can't understand what is going through their mind maybe whenever you talk about these things. And I think I'm in good company. I don't think that we have women here that get upset about these things. But the Bible does talk a lot about these. And if you compare that to the society and the world that we live in right now, there are some things that the world really wants to see change about these attributes. Now, let me just go ahead and get right into it. So here are some things. Number one, the reality of the world being man-run. Okay, society, our world doesn't like that right now. That's like a really big thing. Like, we need to get more women in the workforce. We need to have more women. There's all these incentives for women-owned businesses. I mean, it's really big. Like, if you have this woman-owned business, then it's over everything. Like, there's certain groups and endeavors to kind of make sure that more women are in the workforce, more women are leading and CEOs and all that stuff. But yet, worldwide, I'm not even talking about just the United States, but worldwide, here's some statistics. Take them or leave them. You know how statistics work. But we're going to just looked up a few, so whether we're close or not, I don't know, but you get the idea. Worldwide, apparently, there are only like 38% of women in the workforce, okay? Because there's a lot of women that stay home and do not go to work, so it only ends up being in the world about 38%, supposedly according to this source, that are in the workforce. Apparently, about 1.5% of men stay home. And look, there's situations. This is not a blanket judgment on any man that has to stay home and take care of this or that. But as a general statistic, that only represents like 1.5% of the world, because for the most part, men go to work. They're kind of expected to go to work. You say, oh yeah, well, that's because the societal pressures on them to do that. Like, what's wrong with a man staying home and the woman going to work? That's the common thing that's said today, even though no matter how much they try to get that to change, it never does. Just driving to Fort Scott, I don't know if they changed the sign. It seems like they changed the sign. But driving to Fort Scott, I remember seeing the billboard that it was advertising the college there. I can't remember the name of the college in Fort Scott, and it's got this woman in construction carrying a big old, piece of lumber on her. It's this pretty woman, blonde hair, looks delicate, and she's got this hard hat on and like overalls, and she's got like this big long piece of lumber, like she's getting ready. And of course, everything that was saying there was like, hey, we need more women, in the construction field, and we need more. And I'm sitting there thinking, why? Like, they're not. There's probably a reason they're not in that profession. Why are you trying to force them to be in that profession? I remember when I worked at UPS, it was a hard job, very physical, you had to lift a lot of heavy things, and there weren't a lot of ladies who could make that through, and there were a few that could, but through what was expected out of us to lift so many boxes per night and get them all there. And so, but they had to hire women, and so they kept hiring women, but women couldn't do that job, so they would try to find other jobs for them to do. And eventually, some of the women, they just kind of like jumped over everything, and they just put them into management. So now you got the women just telling the men what to do because the women couldn't physically do that. And I remember just looking at that and thinking, like, this is so weird. Like, it's only going this direction because they feel like they have to make it go that direction. But naturally, what would happen is women would just say, like, hey, this is not my kind of work. I can't do this. And they would go do something else. And the men would be the ones that would do that because that's just how we're naturally built to do. So worldwide, this is pretty much the way it is. Less than 10% of CEOs are women. And again, these statistics are usually thrown out in our society today saying, like, there's a problem here. We need to fix this. We need to change this. And they got representatives all over doing that. And despite all the major pushes, millions and millions of dollars on advertisement, millions of programs out there and incentives trying to get women to join the workforce, trying to get women to be in certain careers and all this, there's still this understanding that it's inequality. And so all these, hey, why aren't women getting paid as much as the men? And why aren't they doing this? And there's just this constant, and what it's actually proving is that this is just the reality. Okay, I'm not even saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm saying this is the reality, that it is a man-run world. I remember seeing an advertisement from like the 50s. You probably somebody in here has seen it. Maybe everybody's seen it. And there was an advertisement, like actually run in like a magazine or something. And it was, and it had something about, I think it was advertising ties. And the man's wearing the tie, and it was like, show her that it's a man's world. And I was like, what in the world? You wouldn't see that nowadays, right? But here we are this many years later with all these programs and all this criticism of that kind of philosophy. And the reality is it still is. Right or wrong, okay, that's not the issue. The fact is that it's there. Look at Titus chapter 2. Titus chapter 2, but speak thou the things which become sound doctrine, that the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith and charity and patience. Titus chapter 2, verse 3, the aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. I'm telling you, that's not a popular verse. If you just read that, if I just put that on my Facebook, I wouldn't even have to give any commentary, and I'd make somebody mad just because it's in the Bible and it just says that. They say, what do you mean keepers at home? What do you mean obedient to their own husbands? What do you mean, what do I mean? This is the Bible. But this is offensive to people. Okay? So, despite all the pushes out there to change this, the reality is that it is still a man-run world. So what is the Christian's responsibility to this? Go back to 1 Peter 3. There's one, we just read that, but there's one verse I wanted to mention here. 1 Peter chapter 3, I think I stopped at like verse 6. Even Sarah obeyed her husband. Look at verse 7. Okay, so what is the Christian's responsibility to this? Okay, first of all, men, and I just touched on this a while back. I preached on, I think it was in Iola, I can't remember, but I preached on chivalry And it says, likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them, talking about the women, the wives, according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife, as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Now, to some, that's an insult. But the Bible says that it's actually, the man is supposed to be honoring the wife by recognizing that they are the weaker vessel, by recognizing that there are some things that they don't have that men have, that they can't do that men can do. And so they honor that, and they recognize them, and they take care of them. It's the man's job to dwell with them according to knowledge. Know where their weaknesses are. Know what it is that's going to upset them. Know what it is that's going to cause strife or something like that. Men, as the stronger vessel, we need to act like the stronger vessel. We need to be the stronger vessel, and we need to make sure that we're going to take care of them. Now, here's the world we live in. I've admitted this, I believe, to some people already, but I was joking on Facebook. I said, something must be wrong with the Google algorithms, because they keep thinking that I actually care about what a multimillionaire who's claiming to be abused by his wife, and he's suing her for defamation or something because she gave him a bad name. That's Johnny Depp I'm talking about. I don't know if anybody knew that. I'm sure you all spiritual people never would. The reality is, I watched some clips on the court case. Like, I wanted to see what's going on, and I'm going to tell you this from the bottom of my heart. Johnny Depp just looks like the biggest sissy and the biggest wimp, and is just like, how dare, everybody say bad things about me and think that I would be mean to my wife. Really, she's the one that beat me, and he's just painting himself as this this victim, of abuse and all that. And I'm thinking, really, you're going to take your wife? Now, I realize that they're either divorced or want to get divorced or whatever the case, but he wants to take her and publicly. Why would he even want people to see him publicly doing this? I don't know. Publicly go through this huge court case where he's suing her like $50 million or whatever it is, and they're both like these elite like actors, actresses. They already make tons of money, and they're sitting there complaining because they can't get along. They're being smeared all over the media from all the drugs and all the stuff that they do, and it's open for the whole world to see. And I'm just like, and all the comments. We love you, Johnny. It's just not fair. Men get abused too, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I want to write on there like, Johnny, you're a punk. Because it does not do anything to me to watch him up there kind of sniveling and being like that. To me, all right, that's the world. That's the world that we live in, okay? From a Christian perspective, men, what do you do knowing that this is, like it or not, a man's world? Well, be the stronger vessel. Be there to support the woman and to protect the women and children, and dwell with them according to knowledge. Show them honor and respect. Be the bigger person, so to speak. And so, and take that. And that's the Christian responsibility. By the way, all throughout the Bible. This is not, so people say, oh, the Bible just makes, a mockery of women and treats them like property and treats them. No, the Bible's honest about the fact that that's what goes on in the world. And then Christianity teaches like, hey, men, do something about it. Be the man, right? You want to go to different parts of where you want to go over to the Middle East and see how they treat their wives. You want to go to Asia and see how women are treated in some of these cultures. Christianity doesn't teach to treat them badly. But the reality is, what we have to recognize is that is the world. The world is man-run, like it or not. Number 2, the reality that men are gross. What do I mean by gross? I couldn't think of a better word. How about slimy? Perverted sometimes, right? Again, not all men, I realize that. Just not all women are beautiful, but we're just talking about those who are. The reality is that most men, probably all men, have a certain level of it to them, but they maybe can control it better than others. But perverted, jerky, just gross men. That's the reality of it. It's from the time my daughter could talk. I'm like, hey, men are jerks. Men are gross. Men are, you got to watch out for them. How fitting that her her fiance read the text this morning. No, I'm just kidding. You got to be careful because men are. Now, look, don't get offended if you're a man, because if you're a man, you probably know. Don't be offended. Here's what's going on in our society today. Left and right, comedians coming out as like, hey, this person way back in the day, it was inappropriate with somebody on the set. And so now they got to put them through all these court cases, and they're losing their jobs, and nobody wants to sponsor them or whatever. I guess the most current one I saw was Bill Murray. I don't even know if anyone knows who he is, but he's an actor who apparently was on set making a movie, and somebody accused him of being inappropriate, and so they had to shut the whole thing down, and they're doing all these investigations and everything. Bill Cosby a while back. What is it with the Bills? Come on now. Bill Cosby a while back. Harvey Weinstein, that's a famous name. How about this one? Josh Duggar. Every Christian knows about that because the world likes to take, especially whenever Christians are this way. Ravi Zacharias, remember that? He passed away, and everybody just loved him. He was a Christian apologist, and everybody just loved Ravi Zacharias. And then they found out that he was like having affairs on his wife and doing all these different things. And how about these Hillsong pastors? You heard about that in the news? The pastors of these big mega church, Hillsong, like a franchise kind of church, and they're all stepping down. They're being forced to step down because they get caught. Like all these ladies are coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, he acted inappropriate with me," and all this stuff. Now look, am I defending men that act inappropriate? No. Should they do that? Of course not. Should they get in trouble or get called out if they do something like that? Well, yes. If my daughter was an actress, which she wouldn't be, if she was an actress working in Hollywood and somebody on the set was inappropriate with her and I found out, I would do something about it, right? But here's the reality of it. Here's what we're finding out in the world. Guess what? Men are gross. Men are slimy. They do bad things. Now, are some women that way too? Of course, and that comes out from time to time. And some women mistreat men, and some women are inappropriate. This is human nature. This is human nature. They do these things again in the Bible. I mean, there's examples of women. How about Joseph? He's working, he's being as loyal and as good of a servant as he can to his boss, Potiphar. And here he is alone in the house, and he's trying to just get some work done, and all of a sudden Potiphar's wife is trying to throw herself at him, and he's trying to resist and everything. So women do it too. But in the Bible, there's also a lot of stories where the women are treated poorly. And so what should our response be as Christians? Okay, I'm a man. I know my thoughts. I know my past, things that I've done. I know that that in me, in my flesh, there's no good thing. In my flesh, I could easily fall into this to temptations that any man could fall into. So what's a Christian response? Number one, try not to be gross. Try not to think bad thoughts and be perverted and do inappropriate things. Okay, look at Job chapter 31. Christian men, we need to flee every opportunity that we have that could get us into that situation where we could take advantage of women or do something. And a lot of times, it kind of goes into my third point a little bit, but a lot of times women know that about the men, and so they'll use that, whether it's for attention or promotion or something like that. And so they'll use that. They're not necessarily wanting to be treated that way, but they'll use that knowing that the men are that way. So men, again, dwell with them according to knowledge. Know what your weaknesses are. Know what you need to do to avoid these things from happening. Job 31, I love this verse here. He says, I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? Right? He's like, I've already decided This is Job. He escheweth evil. He's a great man, righteous man. And he said, I made a covenant with my eyes. I'm not going to look at unclean things. I'm not going to be tempted by a maid and think about that, because that's just going to lead me down the wrong path. So we need to have that kind of attitude, that we take this responsibility of keeping ourselves from that. Now, women, what is your responsibility? Knowing that men are gross. I'm going to tell you something else that's not popular in our society today. Think about the way that you dress. Think about the way that you act, or don't be flirtatious and all these kind of things. You think, well, I don't know that I'm doing that. Well, then you need to sit down with one of the aged women and have that conversation. If your parent doesn't know that or whatever, find somebody who can talk to you about these things. And you need to understand that there are things that you could do. Hey, I'm not giving men an out. I'm not saying that they should do this, but there are certain things you could do that's going to trigger the bad side of a man, that gross and perverted side of a man, to think thoughts that they shouldn't think and to want to do things that they're not going to do. So, yes, should a woman be concerned about the way that she dresses? We read that verse. It talked about modest apparel. Now, modest apparel isn't, today, whenever someone says modest dress, they usually mean like it's long, it's not covering, not revealing, or whatever. Modesty has more to do with not being flashy, not being like over the top, but obviously the Bible talks about, when it comes to dress, here's what I always say. There's basically three things. Gender specific, Bible touches on that. Women shouldn't wear that which pertains to a man. Man shouldn't wear that which pertains to a woman. Covering your nakedness. The Bible talks about that. What is nakedness? Well, I don't have time to turn to all the verses, but nakedness is kind of described as that part that from the thigh up to the buttocks, right? The Bible actually talks about that is described as nakedness. Now, why? Of course, we should cover our nakedness and shouldn't want to show that off, and whether you're a man or a woman, you should cover those things. So when it comes to dress, you got gender specific, you got decent or covering your nakedness, and then you've got the modesty issue, which means don't be flashy, trying to draw attention to yourself and all that kind of stuff. Look how expensive my clothing are. Look how whatever. I always think of flamboyant. Some people just over the top with just trying to be, get everybody's attention with the way they dress. And so we don't want to do those things. And women, certain things might be popular to wear. Certain things might be more comfortable to wear. But you can't just do that just because, well, men shouldn't be looking. Does that make sense? I remember when yoga pants first came out, and it was like a big deal. All these ladies wearing yoga pants. And back then it was a shock. Now it's becoming so common, you almost don't even think about it as much anymore. But back then it was a shock for me to see a woman walking down the street with just these tights on and nothing covering it up. And it's just like, what? Don't you realize that that's not, that's not appropriate to wear? But boy, if you ever said anything about that, the women just go crazy. Like, I should be able to wear whatever I want to wear and be comfortable, and no man should be perverted, and be looking at that. And I'm thinking, you're right, no man should be perverted. But why would you want to trigger that response? Especially if you're a Christian, you love your brother, you don't want to cause them to want to stumble, so you should be careful about that. Only reason a woman is going to wear yoga pants, number one, they think that their legs are ugly, so they need to cover them up and try to make them look better by squeezing them into these really tight things, right? Which is wrong, because what are they trying to do? Well, they're trying to make themselves look more attractive so that men will look, right? Number two, they think their legs look nice and they want to reveal them, they want to show them, so they're like, hey, let me wear this thing. Well, that's wrong motivation. What are you trying to tell? And then the third one is this. Well, it's not about how I look. I don't care. I don't care how I look. I just want to be comfortable. Well, that's not right either. We should care. Are we causing other people to look at us the wrong way or whatever? So not very popular, but the reality is that men are gross. And so men, recognize that you have those possibilities. Now, maybe there's a man here saying, well, not me. I don't look at those things. I don't think those kinds of thoughts. Well, I mean, great. I'm not here to call anybody a liar, but the most of us, I suspect, just based on the Bible, just based on what I see in society, the numbers of things, just based on people I've been around in my life, men I've been around in my life, for the most part, men have a weakness there. And so we need to recognize it. And as a result, we need to try to refrain from, stay out of opportunities that would cause us to fall in that way. We need to try, obviously, to contain ourselves and not be that way, not to be inappropriate. And then, ladies, you can help out by trying to dress appropriate, act appropriate, not doing anything that's going to be enticing to the man. That's the Christian responsibility. But the reality is still the world's man run. The reality is still men are gross. I don't know what else to call it. You all understand it by now, I'm sure, what I mean by gross. Number 3, the reality of men favoring beautiful women. All right, this is actually what started me down this message. Look at 1 Kings chapter 1. Hold your place there in Esther. First Kings chapter 1. So I was just reading in my regular Bible reading. We got a little plan that we try to follow. I don't remember if it's on this. I don't think it's on this bulletin, but in Iola it's there. And if you read it, it works out to like 5 chapters a day or whatever you read your Bible through a year. And just kind of through the natural progression where we are, I was reading through 1 Kings. And I'm familiar with this passage. I've read it many times and thought about it many times. But here's where David, he's at the, he's narrowing the end of his years here, and he's on his deathbed, sort of. And it says, now King David was old and stricken in years, and they covered him with clothes, but he gat no heat. That's kind of like hypothermia. You know what I mean? Have you ever had that where there's nothing you can do to get warm? You try to take a hot shower, you try to cover it with blankets or whatever, but you got these like chills inside and you can't get warm. So there's lots of things people will do. In the hospital, they'll warm you up some blankets and they'll put the warm blankets on you or whatever. Wherefore his servant said unto him, let there be sought for my lord, the king, a young virgin, and let her stand before the king, and let her cherish him, and let her lie in thy bosom, and that my lord, the king, may get heat. So they sought for a fair damsel throughout all the coast of Israel, and found Abishag the Shunammite, and brought her to the king. And the damsel was very fair, and cherished the king, and ministered to him, but the king knew her not. And I remember reading that as a kid and thinking, like, that doesn't seem like that was the right thing to do. to go find a woman to be with. Okay, let's break this down. Because maybe you're like, yeah, but it says the king knew her not, right? Obviously, he took the time to say that. Like David, this old man, he just didn't get heat, and they brought this woman to minister to him. Well, he didn't know her. He didn't have he didn't do anything wrong with her. That is in the narrative. But the narrative doesn't necessarily say, hey, this was right or this was wrong. It just tells you what happened. Okay, but I remember even from a kid looking at that and saying, that can't be right. All right, let's break it down. Did David have any wives? Well, you read a little bit further, and he's talking to Bathsheba. You know what I mean? He's got her around still. There are women that are around, And here's the thing, like, this sounds, maybe this is just my gross mind, like thinking too much about it, but why did they have to go find this young virgin that was fair, and it was very beautiful to look at? Like, wouldn't anybody's body heat work? Right? I mean, but I remember thinking that like this is just the reality of it. He's a king, right? They want to treat the king right. They want to do the best. What are they going to do? They're going to go find a beautiful woman. And I remember just reading that thinking, like, this is just weird. A couple chapters later, or not a couple chapters, but towards the end of this chapter, you see, or I guess it is chapter 2. I believe it's chapter 2. You see that Adonijah, he was the one that was trying to get the throne. He thought he was going to be king, and so Bathsheba goes to David and says, "Hey, wait, you said Solomon was going to be king," and they go through this big ordeal. Solomon becomes king. Adonijah is not going to have the throne, but he goes to his mom and he's like, "Hey, can you just ask me this one? Just get me this one thing from Solomon. Now that he's king, if he could just give me this one thing." And then he asked for Abishag the Shunammite, that same woman. So obviously she's been kept around. She's become part of the, probably part of Solomon's harem, if you will. And so it's an interesting story. Now, I remember kind of just feeling bad for the Abishag. I don't know anything about her, but I can just imagine that this woman's just kind of taken from off the streets, just walking around Israel, whatever, and they're like, hey, you're going to come be the servant to the king, and and I remember thinking, like, this is so weird. And then that made me think about Esther, okay? And so this is why I ended up in Esther. So let's go ahead and go back there. And you're in chapter 1, look at verse 10. So let me kind of summarize, because I didn't really go back and look at it. But so here's what's going on in Esther 1. You follow around the reading, or maybe you know the story. You probably already know this, but let me just break it down real quickly. So the king Ahasuerus, man, I don't know how you did it, brother. Ahasuerus, he's over all these kingdoms and all this stuff, and he's got all of his people here. There's a huge feast, multi-day feast, and he's sitting around. It says that they're drinking. It doesn't necessarily say it's alcoholic, but we assume it probably is. And he's drinking, and he's sitting around, and he's gabbing with the men. They're probably trying to show off and all this stuff. And he says, hey, you know what? Go get my wife Vashti, and have her come here so I can show off her beauty. Now, I've read commentaries. I remember J. Vernon McGee reading his commentary, and he praised Vashti and said, here is this man taking advantage of the woman and bringing her to show her off, and he's been drinking and he's being a bum and all this stuff. And so she stands up to him and says, no, I'm not going to come be a trophy for your friends to look at or whatever. And he hailed her as some kind of a hero. Now, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but I'm looking at that and saying, like, well, I mean, he's gross. I mean, that's kind of like inappropriate to show off your wife to all your friends or whatever. Like, have some respect for her and all. From a Christian point of view, I know better than that. But he did that. And is it necessarily right for her to be like, no, I'm not going to obey you. I'm not going to do what you're supposed to do. Okay. Well, naturally, all the other princes that are around watching this happen, they're like, whoa, wait a minute. If he lets his wife talk to him that way, then all of a sudden our wives will start talking to us that way, and every wives in the land will start talking to us. We got to do something about this. And so they step up. So look, it's a man's world, right? I already talked about that point. Talked about the reality that men are kind of gross. Sometimes they do things that might seem, especially to women, might seem like very inappropriate and very gross to do. But the final thing that this final point is that men favor beautiful women. Okay, so in this story, because of what Vashti did, they kick her out. I don't think she's put to death. I think she's just kind of kicked out of the kingdom and left destitute or whatever. So they say, okay, now what are we going to do? We got to find some wife for the king. Now, it turns out Esther's a pretty smart woman, and she's got a lot going for her. But do you think that's really what they went looking for? Like, let's just go look for the smartest. Let's just go look for a woman who's just got the best personality. Let's just go look for a woman who's just like, just knows how to keep a house and knows how to do this. No, they said, let's go look for the most beautiful woman in the land. And so they looked around and they wanted somebody who was appealing to the eyes. That's just the reality of it. I'm not saying it's right, but considering that men are gross, I guess, this is the reality that happens. And so they went, look at chapter 2. Then said the king's servants that ministered to him, let there be a fair young virgin sought for the king. Chapter 2, verse 7. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther. I started to tell you that's Esther, and the text tells you that. Anyway, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. And the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother had died, were dead, took for his own daughter. So, the big selling point for Esther was that she was beautiful. Now, people say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? You've heard that? It's true. Obviously, there are some things that might be beautiful to one person, and another person might not find it beautiful. Some people might find beauty in a person that other people don't see. Here's what I've found about genuine beauty and beauty that lasts. You usually don't recognize it right off. You know what I mean? Like, if you're just judging either a man or a woman, doesn't matter. If you're just judging by outward appearance, your first thought of them might be like, oh, that's an attractive person or whatever. And then, after you've been around them for a while, you're just like, they're just not attractive anymore because their real beauty comes out. The opposite is true too. There are some people that aren't the most outwardly pleasing, attractive people, but after you get to know them, they start looking more attractive to you because you just know more about them and you see them from a different light. So I understand what people mean, like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But the reality is, there is like a general consensus, like a general recognition or acknowledgement of what constitutes beauty. There are just certain attributes that people are either born with or they work to get fixed. You know what I mean? Like they have, if they got a lot of money, they'll do plastic surgery. They'll do all these things, and they'll try to wear makeup. I was reading about how Jezebel. I didn't really study it real deeply, so I might be wrong. But Jezebel, she's fixing to die, but there's a stirring going on outside or whatever, and before she even puts her face outside the window, she paints her face. So what that means to me is she probably wasn't a very great looking woman, but she was so used to being seen in society as this beautiful woman because she painted her face, had everything. So she painted her face and she put her hair up, and then she pokes her head out the window. It's like, even to look outside, like, oh man, first I got to put on my face and I got to do all this kind of stuff. That's the way I kind of see that. Okay, so some women maybe aren't even born with that natural beauty that is generally recognized and attractive to people, but they'll go out of their way to make themselves look that way. And what are some things we're looking for? Well, the reality is, what makes an attractive woman? Not too young, not too old. Look, if you're an old woman, there's not much you can do about that. But don't old women try to make themselves look young nowadays? And sometimes it's like, come on, that looks so bizarre that this older lady is just trying so hard to fit in with these teenagers or whatever. There's generally but then you have teenagers or especially like middle school or whatever. All these girls, they're trying to look older. And so there's some kind of median age, I guess, where this is what all the women are trying to look like because this is the attractive way to most men. And so again, you see all these rich men, powerful, influential men, and what do? They're going after these young women. And so naturally, what's that going to do? That's going to make the older women jealous. That's going to make them mad. Why is he looking at her? They see somebody who's attractive and they just hate him because they just assume they're going to try to steal their husband away or something like that. But they're not too skinny, not too fat. They're symmetric, or does that, you know what I mean by symmetric? Like, all right, don't look too closely, but I got like one nostril that's like quite a bit smaller than the other one. I don't know if I was born that way. I think it's when I broke my nose when I was playing basketball. I got one eye that's a little lazy, so I got one eye that's bigger than that. It's not very symmetric, okay? So there you go. I'm not that attractive. But people want to be symmetric. They want things to look right on both sides. They want to have good symmetry there. They don't want to have any abnormalities that stand out. And if they do, they're going to try to cover that up, or they're going to try to do whatever they can do to get rid of it. If they got a unibrow, they're going to try to shave it or something, because there are just certain things that just kind of stand out. Now, generation to generation, parts of the world, there might be some differences. For some reason, this culture may be attractive, but overall, no matter where you go in the world, there's some understood things that make somebody attractive. Now, the thing is, not every woman is blessed, I guess you can say, quote unquote, blessed with these attributes. Not every woman has all this just natural beauty and everything is just symmetrical and is just not, they don't have a problem with their weight. They don't have any abnormalities or whatever. And so some women have that. And because of that, there are some women that use that to climb the ladder, right? And so in the business place, a lot of times women maybe weren't protected from that growing up or whatever, so they start realizing that they can use their beauty to get what they want, and then they start climbing the ladder. And a lot of women in politics and stuff like that, you kind of study the history, and you find out. I started to say Kamala Harris, but she's not really that attractive. But anyway, but they use that to get ahead. They make themselves look good. They try to get what they want, and this is reality. This is what goes on in our world. Some aren't necessarily trying to climb the ladder or do anything like that, but some people, because they're born with a natural beauty, become targets of some heinous crimes. That's not their fault. They're just walking around being attractive, and then some man will just, target them and use them for some kind of horrendous crime. This is terrible. These are all terrible things. Okay, I'm not saying that these are right. These are just the reality that we need to understand that happens. Okay, there are gross men, there are beautiful women, it's a man-run world, and these are the realities of life. Okay, but what do we do what's a Christian's response to this? First of all, let me point this out. It's okay it's okay for women to look attractive. Okay, it's not a sin for a woman to look. She can't help it, all right? If God made her attractive, it's not a sin. It's not wrong. Women don't have to dress in some kind of plain clothing and just look disgusting or something like that. And it's not wrong for them to wear makeup just because Jezebel painted her face. There are some people that think no woman should ever wear any kind of makeup because she's a Jezebel if she does. I don't believe that. I don't think it's wrong to have nice clothes to some degree, although those aren't the important things. You know what I mean? There's plenty of scriptures in the Bible that show having nice clothes is a good thing. God, even in Ezekiel, he shares this story. He's using Israel he's using a young lady as a picture of Israel, and he's saying that he marries her and all this stuff, and it's saying how he buys all these nice clothes for her and shoes that are like badger skin, which apparently, there you go, badger skin shoes. And all these jewels and decorations and stuff like that. And he's putting. I don't think that they'd use that as an illustration that God would do that if that was wrong for anybody to ever have something nice or something like that. So it's not wrong for women to look nice. It's not wrong for them to have makeup. Now, here's the thing. Where does it cross the line as far as how a woman looks? Now, again, gender specific, covering nakedness and not being flashy and immodest. I believe those are key. Those are biblical things that I could show, and everybody should try to do that. But here's another thing. Okay, so I'll use my wife for an example. She's never been one to wear a whole lot of makeup. But you know what? Since I first knew her, I had no desire for her to wear makeup. I didn't think she needed it. I didn't think she was I just didn't think she had the kind of complexion that warranted whoa, you need to put some makeup on. I never felt that way. Okay, so she would wear a little bit of makeup, and that's fine. Women, they feel pretty if they do this and all that. And I suppose there's stuff I don't even realize, things that I'm attracted to that I don't even realize she does for me. You know what I mean? So I don't understand that. But what if all of a sudden I made it clear, man, I don't like all these bright colors, bright lipstick, and these dark blue eyeliner, eyeshadow, whatever it's called. And I'm making it clear that I don't really care for that. And she goes around doing that all the time to attract attention. What am I going to think? Whose attention? And the true question, who are you trying to attract? Right? So those are the kinds of things that we got to watch out for. Why are you trying to attract these certain people? Who are you trying to impress? Especially if you're married, there's no reason that you should try to dress differently than how your husband would want you to dress. And so it's not wrong, though, for a woman to take care of herself and to look nice. But don't use it to draw the wrong attention. And then finally, here's the key thing. When it comes to gross men and beautiful women, here's the final thing. Focus rather on, and men do this too, when you're looking for a spouse or whatever, focus on the inward beauty. Doesn't mean the outward beauty is bad. It's not wrong for a man to be attracted to a woman because she's pretty. It's not wrong for a woman to be pretty, okay? But focus rather on inward beauty. Now look at Proverbs 31. I didn't realize this was going to be a long message. I guess I've gone kind of long. This is a great passage on the virtuous woman. We'll just skip down to verse 30. He's talking about the virtuous woman. He's describing all these characteristics of her and everything. And then it says, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain. But a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands and let her own works praise her in the gates. Okay, so women need to focus on the inward beauty. Men, Christians in general, we need to focus on the inward beauty, and we need to recognize people, fathers who just go on and on about how attractive their daughters are or something like that, that's going to cause some harm. Hey, look at this. I don't understand how men will let their daughters like leave the house scantily clad or go to some kind of party where they hardly have anything on, and they're just like, what are you thinking? Now, you're just setting that up for a disaster. Okay, but he should rather praise his daughter for those good things, those godly attributes, for the inward beauty. That's what they should praise. That's what they should try to showcase and be appreciative of. Men, that's what we ought to look for in wives. That's what we should want from our spouses. Not the trophy wife who we just want everybody to look at or whatever, but we recognize more than just the outward beauty, but we recognize the inward beauty. Favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord shall be praised. I don't know, maybe kind of a weird message, but that's what we got. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for your word, for the honesty and the reality of it. We understand, Lord, the sinful nature of the world and sinful nature of our flesh. I pray, Lord, that you'll help us to just understand what you expect of us as godly men and godly women. And I pray that you'd help us to focus on being the right kind of people, the right kind of Christians that we should be in the world where these things are a reality, no matter what we do about them. I pray that you'll help us to live unto you and focus on your kingdom and not the kingdom of this world. I pray that you would be glorified by this church and our lives as individuals as we seek to do that. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.